This episode of Field Notes is sponsored by Birmingham Fastener. Find out how to reduce lead times for your fasteners. Download their free guide today at bhamfast.com/fasteners. Welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. This month's guest is Nima Balasubramanian, AISC's Director of Architecture. She was also one of the 2025 AISC Ideas 2 Awards judges, so we'll certainly talk about that role a little bit as well. So Nima, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Sure, it was my pleasure. Yeah.
So as I always like to say, let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up?
Yeah, I'm originally from India, the southern part of India. I grew up there. I went to school there. Around my 8th grade is when I decided I wanted to do architecture. So I went. In my high school, I took architecture-focused programs and did my bachelor's in architecture in India, became a licensed architect there, practiced for about 2 years, and moved to the United States.
What brought you to the U.S.?
Yeah, I got married.
There you go.
And yeah, my husband, he's from India too, but he was working at that time in the U.S. He was in Vegas. He went to school in Vegas.
Okay.
So I landed in Vegas. Anyways, we were there for like about 3 months and we moved to Boston, and I love Boston.
Sure.
Boston's like my second home. I spent about 10 years of my life there.
Okay.
So I went to school there, did my master's in architecture at Boston Architectural College.
Okay.
And worked there for a while in a couple of firms and had great professors, great contacts, loved the life there. But then again, my husband's job took us to the Netherlands.
Oh, okay.
And in the Netherlands, I started my own firm, practicing with my clients from Boston. All luxury single-family homes or condos. So that was a great experience. It was during peak COVID, so it worked out fine. Nobody expected me to be on site or be in person for any meetings. And it was a great experience. We were there for about 2.5 years. 2022, we came back to Atlanta. Okay. That's where I am now. And I started working for a large firm as operations lead and project manager there, and did a lot of projects. And although I liked it, it was too fast-paced and affected my work-life balance. And at that time in my life is when AISC approached. And it was great. It was a great opportunity, beautiful challenges to start something new. So I took up the offer, and I'm here at AISC now.
Wow, we're glad you're here. That's good to hear. Yeah, that's an interesting path. Yeah, I will say Las Vegas is a very interesting landing spot for somebody coming and living in the U.S. for the first time. But yeah, it's just, I guess, an example of like with any country, it's like sometimes people come to New York and they'll think, oh, is this the U.S.? I'm like, well, it's New York. The rest of the U.S. is much different. Yeah, so obviously you got to experience that right off the bat. But I'm glad. Yeah, it sounds like Boston was a good experience, and obviously you've been in Atlanta for a little while now. So going back to India, what got you set on the architecture path in the first place? Was it just like some sort of fascination with any specific building?
Yeah, I was attracted to buildings that looked initially aesthetically appealing. And then I would ask my dad, oh, that looks great. I want to do something like that. What does one study for it? I had no idea there was something called architecture in my 6th or 7th grade. There was no exposure at that time. And my dad said, oh, it's someone called an architect. They're the one who designs these buildings. And since then I was hooked onto it. And then I looked out for programs that helped me get into that track. So in my high school, I took classes that helped me get there ahead of time. And yeah, so that's how I got into it. I like the programming part. So yeah, when we, it's putting the spaces together. So it's in a house, we know we're gonna have like a living room, dining room, kitchen, bathrooms, obviously, yes, done. But if you're designing a school or let's say student center, something new, specific to each school, they might have different needs.
Sure.
Putting that program of spaces together is what excites me the most.
I want to talk about your role as our director of architecture, but before getting into that, maybe could you tell me, like, since you've been here, which isn't very long so far, Is there anything that's sort of like was like a light bulb moment or like a revelation about steel buildings?
Oh my God, so many things. So yeah, and actually it worked out fine that my ignorance of structural steel and my lack of experience with those projects helped me create the right resources needed for architects similar to that and expose them to the right information that's needed. So it was like, oh yeah, sure. Yes, this is something that would be useful for someone who doesn't know anything about structural steel. For me, the first week, I visited the steel mill here in Atlanta, the Gardell Steel Mill, and that was just a big eye-opener. In school, we play with wood, we play with concrete, but we never play with steel. We don't get to even touch it. We only study the details, and that's about it. So it's never an accessible material or a material that we could have explored further in our own hands, to say. And visiting the mill gave me that experience. Let me see how steel's being manufactured, how much little to no waste that's created, and how everything's clean. Because in my head, I had assumed, steel industries are like what we've seen in movies, like dirty, the suit. My car had no suit after the parking.
It's good for film, and TV.
Yes, and until I got to the facility, I didn't know there was a steel mill there. So that's how clean it was. There was no sound, no smoke, nothing. That was an eye-opener. And I would say every architect, at least while they're in school, they should visit a steel mill to get that experience. They should experience every material equally to then decide what material is good for their project, depending on the client's needs. That was a big eye-opener. And then the other thing was the fact that it is recycled so much, like infinitely recyclable, and the fact that it's 92%, any steel that comes on your project is 92% already recycled material. That was astonishing for me. I was like, what? Really? I didn't know that. So those are two things that really caught my attention.
Sure, no, the recyclability, that rate is like, it's kind of, it's not, I don't know if I want to say it's eye-opening, but it is like, it's like, it's a number we like to talk about, I know it can fluctuate here and there, but like, that's generally, in that range, and that's like, it's a nice thing to be able to tell people. Have you been to a fabrication shop yet, by the way?
Yes. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're different.
It's not quite as dramatic as a mill, but I mean, I think it's one of the sort of like parts of the supply chain that maybe a lot of people don't know about, or they hear about it, but they don't really know what goes on there. So.
Yeah, I had no clue either. I didn't understand the supply chain as much as I do now previously. And the fact that the fabricators played a big role, the fact that there's a service center, those were things that were like, loopholes in my knowledge that I believe all the other architects might have to, and that we have to educate.
Sure. On that note, can you talk a little bit about your role then as the director of architecture, and maybe talk a little bit about our fairly new architecture center?
Yeah, I would say the Architecture Center is a key initiative of AISC. It was created for architects, but also by architects, myself and Elizabeth Lapiro, who's also another architect in the Architecture Center. Our main purpose is to provide the resources that save time, money, and reduce risk, and help architects achieve their project goals more efficiently, more effectively, not having to hunt for this information in like a million places, which is what I used to do. I was like, oh my God, this is a new project, a new challenge. We don't know where to look for this information. If there's a credible source that we can look out to, that'll be an amazing place to start. And the Architecture Center's the goal, like I said, is to provide resources, but in a fun way too. So that's not boring. It's not just webinars. So we want to inform them, engage them, and at the end, inspire them in different ways. And architects are very tangible. Like they like tangible things. They like to touch and feel things, do things with their own hands. And hence, like I mentioned, the steel mill tour was amazing experience for me. And I've heard the architects who've taken the welding workshop tours have had great fun, and now also understand the skill that's needed to do a weld properly. Because on shop drawings, we just mark, field weld, make it like perfect, no issues. And when there's an issue, we make a big fuss about it. But now we understand what goes into it, and we understand the costs that come with it for the time.
Sure.
And appreciate the skill set that's involved in it. So it's a holistic experience that architects will get when they experience it firsthand for themselves through these tours, steel mill job site tours, or workshops that give them access to behind the scenes of how these steel products are fabricated. Yeah, that's what the Architecture Center hopes to do.
Oh, very good. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, and speaking of that kind of like, a lot of architects, everybody's got like their experience level, and there probably are some who have been to fab shops and have been to mills, but like you said, the vast majority maybe hasn't. But just in line with that, when we're talking about architects, and then we're talking about the steel, like structural engineers who do have a good, better understanding of how mills and fabricators work. That kind of ties into our Ideas 2 awards, and you were a judge this year. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about your experience on the judging panel.
I came in to the day where the judges met to do the final review, because we were given the entries ahead of time, reviewed it on our own time. And then I had a certain perception. I had my favorites, and I had my maybe not this project. And when I went there, everything went upside down. Depending from hearing other people's opinions and perspectives from their expertise, helped me understand projects differently and see them in a different light. So that was very insightful. We had a fabricator in there, we had a structural engineer in there, we had a GC, an architect. So to hear their comments on each project from their lens was very interesting, and why they thought this project deserved a certain award. That was very interesting. And we all, in the end, I don't think there was a lot of disagreement in that room. We were open to listening to other people's opinions and coming to a consensus on which is the more deserving project, which I felt was more democratic and successful way of judging.
Sure. No, yeah, it is an interesting experience, because, like you said, it's like that is interesting. I think most people do that. They'll look at the pictures, they'll read the descriptions, and figure out their favorites to start with. That's kind of like your baseline, your starting point, and then you kind of know that you're going to potentially not deviate from there, but maybe somebody's going to change your mind a little bit, and talk about it in a way that you may not have thought about it. So that's cool. It's a fun experience.
Yeah.
Switching gears a bit, just just throughout life, can you point to maybe the best advice anyone's ever given you, either from a professional or a general standpoint?
I guess when people sit and advise you, it never gets into your head, right? Like when I was younger, or that's how I felt. When someone's like sitting down to give me an advice, I'm like, okay, I don't want any advice. That's how I felt when I was too young. And then as I got older, I got advice, or I picked things up as people were just casually talking, and that proved more efficient or effective for me. What I've gathered over time is being honest and sincere in anything I do, work or life, or just spending time with a friend or family. Being honest with that specific moment and sincere to that activity goes a long way. And I believe in that for anything I do. So that's my favorite advice, I guess.
I think that's great advice. Thanks, Nima, for kind of explaining the Architecture Center a little bit more. I also understand there is an architecture newsletter. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we have a monthly newsletter that goes out to around 6,000 architects now, and we hope to keep increasing that subscription list. Sure. And what it offers is current trends, news on what's happening and what's relevant to architects in the structural steel industry, so they can stay updated. And there's also an option for them to submit questions to us if they have anything specific to projects. Hey, I'm working on the steel project. I don't know what to do with this condition. Is this appropriate for acoustics or vibration? Or it can be anything. You can ask anything. So like we have a Steel Solution Center. So it gets into the Steel Solution Center and answered by experts. And so we share those responses monthly. as an FAQ section in this newsletter, which is also, I hear, very useful for architects, because sometimes they might have similar problems in their projects or issues that they can then see where to look for resources or how did someone address it in their project. That's the newsletter. We also offer a lot more tips and smart references, guides on the website, which is all free for architects again. So I would encourage any architect to check it out.
That wraps up another edition of Modern Steel Construction's Field Notes podcast. Again, this month's guest was my AISC colleague, Nima Balasubramanian, and I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. Thanks for listening, everyone. Once again, this episode of Field Notes was sponsored by Birmingham Fastener.